Now that we've looked at all the different Vargas and been able to see how the transits line up to make an event happen, making predictions for the future is all about just putting that stuff together along with what you've already learned in astrology and using the transits to most importantly predict the exact day. That's the fun and great thing about the transits that we're teaching. It's the way you predict something to the day. So whatever method you use to predict something to the month or the year or whatever, just add the transits to predict the event to the exact day to that technique. Okay? Now, at some point, I do want to program into Kala something that you can select a house and a sign and a karaka, and Kala will calculate out however long a time span you want to see when all those things come together in the different Vargas. But unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to get that done right now for the upcoming version next month. It's going to probably be part of the next year's version. I'm actually hoping to get Kala out in 2014 too. And once that's done, it'll be easier to work with the transits, but really, it should be hard at first. You got to pay your dues, which means learn your material well and not have to have a computer do half the thinking for you. Otherwise, really, you don't deserve to get to make the prediction, okay? So I'm sort of purposefully not minding waiting a year to give you a more advanced transit tool. So anyway, you want to use what you already know. Most people are comfortable with Vimshatri Dasha for finding when an event's going to happen, and that's a great timing system. So once you know the Dasha and Antardasha and maybe the third level period that an event's going to happen, you just use your trigger transits and find it and make the prediction to the day. And if you use this technique, you'll get singled out as one of the very, very, very few astrologers who will predict something to the exact day. I've met a couple, very few Western astrologers that will try to predict something to the exact day. I've never, ever met a single Vedic astrologer that predicts things to the exact day. Most, your average Vedic astrologer predicts things to the Dasha and Bhukti. Sometimes they'll go down to 3-level Dashas, which will give a time span of anywhere from 1 to 6 months. Rarely do they even try to predict something to the day, okay? So if you learn those techniques that we taught, you've been taught, if you practice those and use those, you'll be singled out as one of the few people who actually has the ability to predict something to the day. And that's a really rare ability. It's something that's completely ignored by most people. All right, so we're going to start with Vimshatri because that's what most people are skilled at. If we want to predict an event, rather than looking at transits for 10 years and seeing when the right transit's going to line up, let's just find the Dasha and Antardasha when the event can happen. And after that, we're going to look for the exact day, okay, using the new techniques. So here's a chart of a person who's been running Saturn Dasha until about 2 years ago. Saturn's in the 8th sign from the ascendant. And that right away tells us it's not going to be the most comfortable dasha. Planets in the 8th are never going to be the most comfortable. And life has not gone the way he's expected it because Saturn's in the 8th. Okay? Now, because the 8th house is always the unexpected. But he has gotten a good job working for the government in an area dealing with retirement. We see Saturn is the planet of retirement. It's in the 8th house of other people's money. So it's all about entire retirement investments and such for, people who work for a prominent city in the United States. Okay. Government employees, basically for city employees of a city in California. Now, Saturn we see is in a friend sign, and that should normally make Saturn really delighted and happy with dealing with retirement benefits and those kinds of things. Unfortunately for Saturn, Venus, the ruler of Saturn, is sleeping in Leo. So Saturn doesn't get any delight from his friend Venus. Okay? Then Saturn's aspected by his enemy Sun to 32 points, his enemy Mars, which comes to a total of 44 points. And then he's aspected also by his friend Mercury to 45. So there's roughly an equal amount of delight and misery on Saturn. So it's a mediocre Saturn. So he's been happy that he's had a good job opportunity that pays fine, but he's not the most excited about his work. It's just a job. Okay, way to pay the bills and pay the home mortgage and all that. Now, this person has sort of wanted to do their own thing for a long time. We see the potential for them doing their own thing by Mercury in the first house. Mercury in the first house always has a good capacity to do its own thing, do its own business or something. In this case, it's more important because from Libra, Venus is in the 11th, the Lord of the Lagna, which puts the Pada in Gemini, the sign of Mercury, which gives them Gemini qualities in their, to earn a livelihood with, one of which is business and doing things for yourself. And then that nice Mercury happens to fall in the first house, sign of self. So Mercury gives a desire for him to do his own thing, something that, that he doesn't have to go to work, be his own boss. Unfortunately, the Sun, sitting in the 12th house with K2, hasn't really given him the fire to do his own thing, the ambition, the full ambition to do his own thing. Sun with K2 can really hide a person's ability to go out there and rule their own kingdom. Okay, it sort of subdues the masculine, ambitious side of a person. So this is the other side that's sort of been holding them back. So they got this, both their parts of their personality not really working well together. But Mercury period's coming, luckily. And with Mercury period, or Mercury periods here, with Mercury period here, there's some opportunity for them to do their own thing because it's Mercury in the first house. Okay? And Mercury happens to rule the Sun as well, and that amplifies that. Now, Mercury's a pretty good planet. Mercury's with Jupiter, where he's getting delighted by Jupiter. Jupiter always helps the planet he's with. Then Mercury gets a little delight from Venus. Venus is sleeping in the Varga, in the Rashi, but in other Vargas he'll be awake, and we'll get to those. Then Mercury, unfortunately, is aspected by the Moon to 42 points. Okay? And that's starving Mercury. Okay? A lot of the reason this person is not able to figure out a way to make things, to do their own thing is because they have, their emotional response to it's not good. Okay? They have a hard time dealing with people on a level of business because it's all too personal for them. Mercury's a planet of business, influenced by the Moon. Any transaction you have gets too personal and therefore uncomfortable, and you can't really just do a business because people who bother you or really bother you, you won't like them. And people you really like, you'll just want to give everything for free. And that's not how Mercury operates. You can't run a business that way. With a business, you have to treat everyone the same, whether you like them or hate them or whatever. And you have to treat them all fairly. And that Moon sort of gets in the way of that Mercury. But Mercury is helped by Jupiter, who's delighting him. So Mercury's a bit better because Jupiter's right on top of him and Jupiter's quite strong. Or Jupiter's right on top of him. Now in the Rashi chart, Jupiter's sleeping. So Jupiter's not helping Mercury in the Rashi chart at all. But he might help Mercury in other places. Okay? But in any Varga, it's basically Mercury's influenced by Jupiter and Moon. Moon is hurting it, and Jupiter is helping it. So in any Varga where Jupiter's strong and Moon is weak, Mercury will do well. On the other hand, if Moon's strong and Jupiter's weak, Mercury won't do as well, unless Mercury, of course, is in a sign of a friend or something. So in the Rashi chart, Mercury will not do really well, okay? Because even though it's with Jupiter, it's being starved by the Moon. And any of their own things they want to do, business they might want to run for themselves, emotionally will be really stressful. Their emotions will get overly involved in the business, and it'll be hard for them to maintain a healthy balance in their business undertakings. unfortunately, okay? Now, the Varga for career type things and taking action in one's chosen path is the Dasumsha chart. In the Dasumsha chart, Mercury is in the sign of a neutral, in the sign of Saturn. Jupiter, who's conjunct Mercury in the Rashi chart, is sleeping in the Dasumsha because it's debilitated. So Jupiter, unfortunately, can't help Mercury. That's not good. The moon up here in Aries is in a decent dignity. It's stronger than Jupiter and is going to starve Mercury really bad. Okay, unfortunately. So Mercury's more starved. Now the other planet that's helping Mercury is Venus is helping Mercury to 16 points. That's a little bit. And that Venus, fortunately, in the Dasumsha is in its own sign Libra. So that will help Mercury and delight Mercury and help Mercury be more productive. But Venus is also in the end of Libra. It's at 28:45 Libra. It's towards the very end of an odd male sign, which means it's getting old. It's an old, dead planet. So it really won't be able to help Mercury much at all. Okay? So Mercury's not really great in the Dasumsha, unfortunately. Okay, so we don't see a great business coming together. There's some possibilities of some business, but not with a lot of comfort. But let's look a little further, see if there's anything that can help us here, or help him. In the 60th Varga, which has to do with all things, Mercury is in a friend sign Taurus, and Venus is decent in that chart. Jupiter's also in a friend sign, or in a decent condition, so it can help Mercury a lot. And the moon's in a neutral sign, so his strength is not going to be that strong. So Mercury's actually looking a lot better in the 60th Varga. So that can help Mercury throughout anything in all Vargas he's doing. So it makes things all a little bit better. In the 45th Varga, Mercury happens to be in its own sign. And Jupiter's sleeping in Taurus, so can't help him. And the moon's in a mediocre sign in Virgo. So Mercury's okay here, because it's in its own sign. It's going to be able to help itself more than the moon is going to hurt it. So pretty good in the 45th Varga. That's the other Varga that has to influence many things. And then in the 40th Varga is the Varga of things getting really good or really bad. So those taking extreme positions. In that chart, Mercury's in a neutral sign in Aries. Jupiter's in a friend sign, which is good. Moon's in a neutral sign. Venus, the other planet that influences Mercury, is exalted. So in the 40th Varga, Mercury gets a little better than worse. So since Mercury is good in all these Vargas, there's some hope for Mercury to be a decent dasha. It's not going to be an outrageous dasha where the person feels like they're doing what they're meant to do and they're so joyous every day. But they'll find something good enough to be content with it, and even though there's a lot of things they don't like about it. Okay? So Mercury dasha has some potential. Now, the other thing Mercury rules is the 12th house. And the 12th house is the house of retirement. Okay? But Mercury also rules the 9th house in the Rashi chart, and that's the house of always wanting to do something that has meaning. But Mercury, rules the 12th, rules retirement. It also rules the sun, which rules your ambition. So it's really sort of two things. The sun's the karaka for the 10th house as far as gaining power. It's the karaka of the first house for finding your place in the world. And Mercury ruling that 12th has the potential to retire him, but also has the potential to get him going on something new because the sun is representing a new career. And then Mercury is in the movable sign Libra, and movable signs like new things and change. Okay? So Mercury period, it will retire them from their government job and get them involved in something new. Okay. The question is, when are they going to take action in their new thing? Okay. We've just seen that Mercury in the Rashi is not very good. And we've seen that Mercury in the Dasumsha is not very good, which means the great new things cannot happen in Mercury. Mercury is not strong enough to bring them about. Mercury is going to continue that what was happening in the previous dasha under Saturn, Jupiter. What was happening under there career-wise wasn't really great, because in the Dasamsha, Saturn's in Pisces, ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter sleeping, and then Jupiter's conjunct Mercury and getting starved by Mercury too. So it's a really bad Jupiter in the Dasamsha. So the last few years of their work, last few years of their life, they've just been hating life at their work. They just hate it. It's been really depressing, low Jupiter. They haven't felt meaning and purpose on it. And they really don't even want to stay there, but they're just going to stay until they get a certain amount of retirement benefits. And then they want to quit and retire from that job after, like, I don't even remember, like 15 years, 20 years of service or something. Okay? But over the last few years of Saturn Jupiter, it was really bad. It was heavy. It was so heavy in the fact that over this time, if you were to see this person every year, say you see him once a year on his birthday for a reading, every year he's more depressed about his work situation the last few years since Saturn Jupiter. And he hasn't started feeling any better about it in Mercury, because Mercury's a shitty planet. So it's going to continue that unfortunate, cumbersome theme of not finding any meaning and happiness in their work. And they've been working extremely hard as well. Lots of overtime had to be taken throughout the Mercury. Okay? Now, after Mercury is Mercury K2. Mercury K2 is going to give the results of Mercury, first of all. Its Lord, Mercury, which you've seen is not good in the Rashi. In the Dasamsha, K2 is going to give the results of Jupiter, which you've seen in the Dasamsha, Jupiter is debilitated in Capricorn, unable to do anything positive, and even worse, starved by Mercury. So Mercury K2, they're going to also be very fed up with everything. They're just not going to be happy. And Mercury's goal of retirement is just not going to happen. Mercury's goal is retirement because it rules the 12th house, but also getting something new started because it's in the first house and in a movable sign. So that's not going to happen in Mercury K2. It's going to happen in Mercury Venus. Venus is a friend of Mercury, at least. It's not helping in the Rashi chart, but in the Dasamsha chart, Venus is in better shape. And he rules the 10th sign and the 7th sign of business, and he rules the 12th Lord, the 12th house, which is the house of retirement. So Venus seems to have some potential. He's in Libra, which looks really good. And the thing is that it's at the end of Libra where Venus has no power. But he's still in Libra. That means Venus still feels swashta, or confident and good about himself. We don't see that with K2. K2 is going to feel like Jupiter, which is debilitated, which is Nietzsche, alarmed and stressed. Saturn, Jupiter, they felt stressed because Jupiter was debilitated. Mercury was in a natural, or an enemy's dignity. Let me show you. Okay, dignity, Mercury, friend. Oops, hold on. I had a wrong option set here. I always do it in my head, so I never bother with that option. And I just installed a beta version of Kala, so I never even thought to reset that option to what I use it at. Anyway, Mercury's in an enemy's dignity. So his Diptati Avashta is miserable. Okay, unhappy, it's not happy. That's Diptati, that's how it feels. That's not what it's going to produce, that's how it feels. So Mercury's not feeling good. Venus, even though he doesn't have a lot of strength to actively do things and make changes all by himself because he's at the end of Libra, he still feels good. So that's like Venus is on his deathbed, but feels really happy with his life and where he's at. And he rules the 12th house. Venus is influenced by neutral Mars, and friend Saturn, wonderful. And Saturn's influenced him to 45 points. And Saturn's in Pisces, where he has, he's in a natural neutral sign, so he'll have some influence. And he'll help Venus. So Venus gets helped by Saturn. He'll be able to retire. Saturn's the planet of retirement. Venus rules the 12th house of retirement in the Dasamsha. Saturn's a friend. So in Saturn, Venus, he'll be able to retire. Mercury, Venus, he'll be able to retire. Venus is helping Mercury. And Venus is also getting helped by Saturn. Mercury has the capacity to start something new because it rules the sun, but not really in a something great by itself. But Venus has capacity to start something new because it rules the 10th house in the Dasamsha, and it's an immovable sign, and movable signs love new things. So we see a retirement and career change in Mercury Venus. Okay? So that takes us to April 3rd, 2014. So now we know that between April 3rd of 2014 and January 14th of 2017, that they're going to start a new action, start a new career. And that's what we're going to focus on. When is the new career going to start? The person won't get their retirement benefits for like 15 years. Okay? That's when they'll actually be able to withdraw their retirement benefits. So that when they quit this job, when they retire from this current position, they're going to immediately have to have something new on board to get going with, or else they won't be able to support their family and everything. So the important thing is, when are they going to start their new job? That's what we're going to predict today. When are they going to start their new job? Now, to a new job, there's always two things. There's waking up thinking, I want to be this. That's a first house transit. Then there's getting active in that job, actually doing that thing. That's a 10th house Dasamsha transit, getting active with something, a karma or action transit. So that's what we're going to be looking for. A transit in the Dasamsha, bringing together the Dasamsha with everything. And we want to look for transits starting on April 3rd, 2014 or later. Now, Venus is in good dignity in the Dasamsha. So it has some chance that it could happen right in Venus. After Venus is Venus, Sun. So Mercury, Venus, Sun, taking it to the third level. Sun is a planet of doing career-related things. Sun rules the 5th house. The 5th house is change in profession or fall from profession. So the 5th house can always cause you to terminate your career. Okay? The 5th Lord, 5th house can always do that. But how is the Sun? Well, the Sun is influenced the Moon by 24 points, his friend, and by Mars for 19 points, also his friend. Hurt by Saturn and Venus a bit, but not bad. So Sun's pretty good. So if we wanted to work down to 3 levels, Mercury, Venus, Sun is really likely. Mercury, Venus isn't going to really be likely because Venus is too old. He's at the end of Libra. If Venus was like at 18 Libra, Mercury, Venus would do it. As it is, probably not. Mercury, Venus, Sun looks better. After Venus, Sun is Venus, Moon. Well, Moon rules the 8th Lord in the Dasamsha, okay, the house of transitions and changes. It's possible, okay. However, the Moon in the Rashi is in the 12th from Venus, and the Moon is not aspecting Venus, not influencing Venus. It's more, whereas Sun rules Venus in the Rashi too. So I would probably put my money on Venus making it happen rather than Moon. And also, because Sun can make it happen, it comes before Moon, okay? But I'm just kind of going through our options. Venus, Mars, not likely. Mars is a neutral. Doesn't have too much going on here. And also Mars is dead, being in the last few degrees, last 6 degrees of a male sign, Gemini. Mars is dead, so it can happen in Mars. Rahu is going to give the results of Mercury, which are just mediocre, probably not going to happen under Rahu. It ain't going to happen under Jupiter, because Jupiter is debilitated and sleeping. Could it happen under Saturn? Possibly, but Saturn is a friend of Venus, so that's when Venus gets helped, or it could happen under Saturn. And the fact that Saturn's a good friend of Venus shows one of the best times under Venus will be that of Saturn. So Mercury, Venus, Saturn will certainly be good and a possible period of change and retirement. Saturn, after that is Mercury. Mercury is not influencing Venus. Mercury is not in great shape himself, so it ain't going to happen in Mercury. K2 is going to give the results of Jupiter and not good. So the options that the things can happen are Venus, Sun, the good things. Venus, Mercury, Venus, Sun, and Mercury, Venus, Saturn are the good career periods. And Mercury, Venus, Moon can be the period of changing their career or terminating their career because it's the Moon. And the Moon, of course, is conjuncting the 10th cusp in the Rashi chart too. So those are the three periods. So when are those periods? Mercury, Venus, Sun. Let's write these down. We'll just write them down here. Okay. Mercury, Venus, Sun is 9/19/2014 through 11/9/2014. Okay. After that is Mercury, Venus, Moon, which is 11/9/2014 through 2/2015. Okay. Then we said Saturn would be good too, right? And Saturn happens in 2016. Okay, so Mercury, Venus, Saturn is 1/15/2016 through 6/24/2016. Okay, so we've got three possible windows of them taking new action in their career. When's it going to happen? Well, now we're going to go to transits. Go to the animated transits. I like to work down to 3 levels usually before I start pulling out transits. Lots of times, for certain things, I'll work down to 4 or 5 levels in Vimshatri, but lots of times I don't, because if your birth time's off, you'll get thrown. Whereas you work down to 3 levels, even if the birth time's off or something a little bit, your dashas won't change too much, okay? But a lot of you might just want to work down to 2 levels, but by working down to 3 levels, I've got less transits I need to bother with looking at, okay? So we've got the windows when we think something will happen. So a lot of astrologers, your avid Vedic astrology would tell this guy, in Mercury, Venus, you are going to retire from your government career and start a new career on your own. Well, Mercury, Venus is like a 3-year period, but that's where they'd leave the prediction. A very few Vedic astrologers might say, well, it'll probably happen in Mercury, Venus, Sun. Failing that, Mercury, Venus, Moon. Failing that, Mercury, Venus, Saturn. But those are the 3 periods I think it could likely happen. Well, even if they pick Mercury, Venus, Sun, that's a great prediction because that's just a less than 2-month window, which that's a small window. But if they said Mercury, Venus, Saturn, well, that's still a 6-month window. That's a pretty big window. That's half a year. It's better than a 3-year window. So it is better just to work down to 3 levels. But what we can do at transits, we can work down to the exact day. Okay, and that's amazing to do that. So let's look at Mercury, Venus, Sun. September 19th, 2014 till November 9th, 2014. So I'm going to set this to September 19th, 2014. And see where things are. I want them to get active in their new career. So I want Jupiter, I want the 10th house being activated. From September 19th till September 19th until November 9th. I want to see what kind of windows there. Let's just look at the transits of Jupiter. Jupiter's a good thing to start with because he's slow moving, so we can kind of know where he's going to be more easily in our heads. Jupiter at the time is in Leo, which is holding the Lagna Lord Venus. It's not influencing the 10th Lord, though, which is the moon over here, unfortunately, okay, or the 10th house. Is influencing the Karaka of work, Saturn. No, it's not. Not Rashi aspecting Saturn. We're seeing if Jupiter is going to be doing any broad activation to any of the career things. Jupiter is, okay, and Jupiter's not at this time. Oh, the other planet we could possibly look at is the Sun, Jupiter's not influencing that sun either. So that reduces the possibility of something really big happening in this first window. But don't want to completely discount it yet because, it would be nice to have some Jupiter broad activation. Let's look at what planets are influencing the 10th house, the 10th lord, and the karaka of that, which is Saturn, the important karaka of the Dasamsha. Well, Rashi aspect Y, Saturn in transit is Rashi aspecting 10th house and 10th lord during that period. And it'll be there, for a long time. So let's pull up the Dasamsha and see if what sign, if Saturn's ruling anything in the Dasamsha. The 10th cusp was ruled by Venus. The 10th Lord Moon is ruled by Mars. So it's not happening. Saturn's not going to be able to activate anything on the Dasamsha, broad activation. In the Shashtyamsha, Saturn rules the Moon, the 10th Lord, and the 6th. So from the Shashtyamsha, Saturn at least is causing some broad activation from the Moon. So there's a little bit of something going on. Okay. Now, let's just see. It's probably not going to happen, but let's see if Jupiter is going to go retrograde anytime soon. Because if Jupiter would go retrograde into Cancer, then he would be on the 10th house causing broad activation. But I don't doubt he's going to. It doesn't look like it. Okay. Jupiter's not going to go into Cancer. Let's find out when Jupiter is going to influence by Rashi aspect any of that good stuff. Jupiter's Leo, is hanging out in Leo. I don't think it's going to happen until around 2016 or so. All right, Jupiter goes into Libra mid-September 2016. At that point, Jupiter's Rashi aspecting Saturn, the Karaka. So we have some good broad activation, although we'll probably lose other broad activation. Let's take our notes again and see if that was one of our windows. We had 2016 from January 15 to 6/24, 2016 as one of our windows based on Vimshatri. So Jupiter's never going to be causing broad activation during one of those windows that we've decided is good. Well, when all four broad activation factors are there, the best and biggest things happen. Now we know Jupiter's not going to be there. Okay, so we can't use Jupiter for confluence for the event being greater and bigger. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Let's go back to November or September 19th, 2014. Let's see where Mercury is going to be. Mercury, because he moves fast, is always going to be causing some broad activation. He'll be, he's broadly activating the 10th Karaka of 10th Saturn for the Dasamsha at this time, and then he'll be aspecting it from, the Moon in the 10th from here, so from Scorpio. So all throughout this window, Mercury is going to be causing broad activation. Great. In the Dasamsha to the Karaka Saturn. Saturn's ruled by Jupiter in the Dasamsha, so he's not going to get any broad activation there. So the broad activation's weak. In the 60th Varga, Saturn's in Libra, ruled by Venus. So when Venus gets over to Libra, it'll Rashi aspect Saturn. So, well, by the time he gets there, Mercury's leaving, unfortunately. But then we're going to have Mercury broad aspecting, Rashi aspecting the Moon in the 10th. And then Venus will be Rashi aspecting Saturn. So we get some more broad activation happening here after September 30th. So in this window, we do have some broad activation, but not really powerful activation. Okay? Now, since we've worked the event down to the third level dasha, we don't have to focus too much on broad activation as long as some is there. The more that's there, the bigger and better the event can be. The fact that there's not that much shows it's only so-so. Now, what is there? Saturn, the lord of the moon in the Shastyamsha, is Rashi aspecting moon. That's 1 point. Mercury is Rashi aspecting the moon. That's 2. So there's 2 things on the moon. That's pretty good. So it's looking best. The only time we get 2 factors is when Mercury is in Scorpio, where it Rashi aspects the moon, the 10th lord. At the same time, Saturn is Rashi aspecting the moon, the 10th lord, as well. Okay, so that's the only time we really get 2 broad activation factors happening. So let's look at September 28th, because that's where the bigger things can happen, because we have more broad activation. And it'll take Mercury quite a while to go through Scorpio, and during that window, we'll watch Mercury as we look at the trigger transits. Because the next thing we need to find is a trigger transit in the Rashi. Don't even worry about looking for trigger transits in the Vargas until we found a trigger transit in the Rashi. Okay? And that makes it easier too, because it's hard to look at transits from multiple Vargas. So, September 28th, once Mercury goes into Scorpio, the trigger transits we're seeing is Sun is, that's a red line, ignore the red lines. Nothing exactly. It doesn't look like there's anything there. What we're looking for is a moon, to 10th, a moon transit, including the Lagna or the Sun. Atmakaraka is Mars. So a Mars moon, Mars to 10th, moon to 10th, Saturn to Mars, Mars to Saturn. Anything involving the first house, Venus, with the 10th house Lord Moon, or 10th house cusp Cancer, or Venus to Saturn, the Karaka, or Mars, the Atmakaraka to Saturn, or Mars to Moon, or Moon to Mars, or Saturn to Mars. When are those going to happen? Well, let's see. I'm going to just kind of make some educated guesses here. Mercury will be opposite Saturn shortly. Oh, we don't care about that though. That's just broad activation. Mars from Capricorn will trine Saturn. Venus, the other fast-traveling planet, will be Rashi aspecting Saturn before long as it goes through Libra. So that's positive. So let's just go day by day. We've got until November 19th and November 9th to find a transit that trigger the event. Okay, we have a Mars-Moon conjunction. That's Atmakaraka 10th Lord conjunction. Unfortunately, the moon's not full enough to really do anything by itself at that time. Now here we get a Sun to Venus. Well, it's just a sextile, it's not a Rashi aspect. Rashi aspects are green. Here we have a moon Rashi aspect Venus, but the moon's not full enough yet to do anything. Now here we have a Mars Rashi aspecting Sun transit, and that's a great transit for the Rashi chart, finding what they want to do in life, but actually getting busy with it, doing the work. We want to look for ideally a Saturn transit, a Saturn something. So let's see what's happening here. That Venus is coming up and will very shortly be Rashi aspecting Saturn. And look at that. Okay, where is it? It was... Here's a serious transit day. Okay, October 17th. Venus is Rashi aspecting Saturn, the Karka of the Dasamsha. Venus is the Lagna Lord. So in the Rashi, we have a trigger transit now. Okay. So now we need to pull in the other Vargas. So let's go to the Dasamsha. And in the Dasamsha, we see that Mars is the Lagna Lord and Venus is the 10th Lord. So Venus, the 10th Lord, is Rashi aspecting Saturn, the Karaka of the Dasamsha. Perfect. Okay. Then Venus, the Lagna Lord in the Rashi, is Rashi aspecting Venus, the 10th Lord in the Dasamsha. Perfect. We got a Dasamsha transit on this day too. And to make it all better, we've also got the Sun involved and Mercury involved. And this is a powerful, powerful transit that's going on in this person at this time. At the same time, Saturn, Karaka of the Dasamsha, is trining Rahu. Remember, whenever Rahu and Ketu get involved, the events become more prominent. In the Shashtiyamsha, let's see if we get a Shashtiyamsha transit. The first is ruled by Libra. We have Venus, Rashi aspecting Saturn. So we have a nice Shashtiyamsha transit. But we can also continue to see if there's any other ones. Not exactly. Okay. But we do have a Shashtiyamsha transit taken care of. How about the 45th Varga transit? Here, the moon is the Lagna Lord. The 10th is Saturn. Well, we have Venus, the Lagna Lord from the Rashi, and the Atmakaraka, Rashi aspecting Saturn, the 10th and the 45th Varga. Looks good. We got a 45th Varga transit. In the Kavadamsha, we've got Mars, the Lagna Lord, and Jupiter, the 10th Lord. Do we have a Kavadamsha transit? Well, let's see. We don't have a 40th Varga transit, it doesn't look like, based on that. The other important planet in the 40th Varga is the 4th house Lord, which is ruled by Jupiter, okay, as well. And Jupiter does not seem to be doing anything in transit, unfortunately. It's conjunct the moon, the 10th from the Rashi, but that's weak because the moon is not full, okay. So everything was looking perfect for a huge event to happen, but without the 40th getting involved, the event can only be so big. Let me make sure I'm not missing something though. With transit's always easy to miss something. Nope, don't think I missed anything here. Now, Jupiter's at 18 degrees. A few days earlier, when Mars was at 18, let's see when Mars was at 18 degrees. Let's see what's going on with those transits. When Mars was at 18 degrees, when he's at 17 degrees, early in the month, he was trining the sky with Jupiter. So now the 40th Varga got involved. But did we have a Rashi transit that day? Did we have a Rashi transit? Let's see. We actually did. We just missed it at first because always the full moon's the easy one to miss. The moon is full, okay, and it's trining Venus. 10th Lord trine moon, Venus, Lagna Lord. So we have a Rashi transit also on the 8th. We have a 40th Varga transit on the 8th due to Mars and Jupiter being trine in the sky. Let's say we have a Dasamsha transit on the 8th, though. In the Dasamsha, Venus is the 10th Lord, Mars is the Lagna Lord. Venus at 11 degrees Libra at the time. Is just about to Rashi aspect Jupiter in the sky. In fact, let's see. Let's see, Jupiter's, let's see if they're in the same Navamsha. Jupiter's at 17 of Leo. Venus and Jupiter are Rashi aspecting each other in the sky. And why am I using Jupiter? Venus is the 10th in the 10th and Mars. Oh, actually, so we don't care about Jupiter for that. When I start talking this, my brain has to slow down what I usually just glance at things, and so I always start stumbling over what I'm saying. So, just to rephrase, make sure I didn't say anything that I'll regret. We're looking for the Dashamsha transit, which is Mars, Lagna Lord, Venus, 10th Lord. And my Venus, yes, will be Rosh aspecting Jupiter. Okay, that can possibly work because Venus is the 10th Lord, Rosh aspecting Jupiter. And Jupiter can always activate anything, right? When it's influencing it. So that's Jupiter in transit, Rosh aspecting Venus in transit. Jupiter's in the 6th Navamsha of Leo going forwards. So when Venus is in the 6th Navamsha going backwards, it would be an exact transit. Okay? And Venus happens to be in the 6th Navamsha going backwards. And the easy way to approximate that is 17, 13 plus 11, 10 is getting close to 30 degrees. But the 6th Navamsha backwards in Libra would end at, the 6th Navamsha ends at 10 degrees, and Venus is between 10 degrees and 1320. So it's in the 6th Navamsha backwards, Jupiter's in the 6th Navamsha forwards. And remember, when we do Rashi aspects in movable and fixed signs, we have to count the Navamshas in one sign backwards. All right, good. So we have a full moon transit to Venus, a Venus-Jupiter transit, so the 10th Varga is taken into consideration. Covered. Then in the 45th Varga, Moon is the Lagna Lord. 10th Lord is Saturn. Okay, we don't have any Moon-Saturn thing right at that time. However, the next day, the Moon is going to conjunct Saturn, and it's going to be just about full. So that's still, we can consider that if the transit happens within a day, we can lump them all together. So Moon will be hitting Saturn here, so that's positive. In the 45th Varga, the other important planet is Venus, the 9th Lord. And Venus isn't doing anything to Saturn or the Moon or anything. Oh, actually it will. Venus is also opposite the Moon. Perfect. Okay. And Moon is the 10th Lord, of course, in the Rashi, opposite the Moon in the sky. Venus and Moon are opposite in the sky that day, who's the 9th Lord, which acts like a Lagna Lord in the 45th. So we have a 45th Varga transit. Then Kavadamsha, we've seen we also have a transit there. So all the transits are going to line up on October 8th, October 9th. Okay, on the 9th, Venus, Moon will be on Saturn. So 8th, 9th is when we can predict the day that this person has change in their career or starts a new career path. Okay, takes new action in their new career. Now, when you do this, first look for the Rashi transit. If you see that, look for the Dashamsha transit. At that point, you're going to be pretty safe that the transit will quite likely happen, but not always. To really make sure, especially for something really significant that they'll remember in the years ahead, not just something that they don't even remember the event. For the significant things, you also need the transits involving the 40th, 45th, and 60th. So while we did find a week later, or a few days later, I think it was October 19th or something, we saw a Dashamsha transit, a Rashi transit, a 60th transit, and a 45th transit. We didn't have the 40th transit. And without the 40th transit, nothing really good or really, really bad can happen. Okay? So because of that, we looked for other days. It can still be an important day that week for them, but in the context of their whole life, the October 19th wouldn't have been the important day. So we wouldn't want to predict that day as the event. We want to predict the biggest day. And when something gets started new, that's the biggest day. That's just not another day in your life. Now, 10 days later, 11 days later, they're going to have another transit that where all the Samsha factors line up, except not in the 40th Varga. That'll still be a good day in their work. They're going to have a great, important day at their work that day, but it's not going to be important enough to be the beginning day. But if after this we want to say, okay, in your first big day at work, your first important day at work, will be on the 19th when all the other Dasamsha transits line up, just not the 40th. But we wouldn't use that day for predicting the day they start their new job, okay? They might land, whatever they intend to do at that time, they might, make a big step of progress on the 19th. But the day of starting their new action looks like the 8th, possibly the 9th of October 2014. So this takes a little bit of work, but it's not that hard when you get used to it. All this I talked about in about 50 minutes to you guys. This would take me, if I was just doing it by myself, 5 to 10 minutes usually, okay, to find the dasha, find the transit, and work through it. Mentally you can do it really, really fast when you get used to it. So since it is a little bit of a time-consuming technique at first, you will want to practice on your own chart, because everyone loves spending hours on your own chart, but it's not always that fun to spend hours on other people's charts. But this is exactly how you do it to predict the event to the exact day. Okay? It's not hard. It's just a matter of finding the transits to line up without missing one. And at first, I missed that full moon transit. Now, what I usually do, I kind of go through the period, the window that I think the event will happen. And then I go and see if I missed any full moon transits, because when you're jumping through Kala at a day at a time, the moons oftentimes won't draw a line, okay, to any planet. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. But the moon moves 4 Navamshas a day on average. The transit lines are drawn every Navamsha. So there's a good chance it's only going to be 25% of your times the moon is going to transit something that you'll see it if you jump one day forward at a time. If you jump back hour by hour, you'll see it every time, but that's too tedious to go hour by hour. So day by day is the way to go. So you just look for those things to line up, and to help narrow down that period for when you look, work the event down to 3 levels of Vimshatri Dasha, or at least 2 levels of Vimshatri Dasha. Now, in this event, when this event's happening, we saw 2 points of broad activation. Mercury, one of the broad activating factors always, is Rashi aspecting the moon in the 10th cusp. Saturn, who rules, what did Saturn rule? The moon, the 10th lord from the Rashi in the Shashtyamsha, is Rashi aspecting the moon. So the lord of the moon in the Shashtyamsha is Rashi aspecting him. So the moon has 2 factors. There's not a single career factor in the chart right now that has all 4 points of broad activation. Unfortunately, just 2, which is average. It's not great. So the career they start isn't going to be the most amazing new thing in the whole world. It'll just be of an average sort, because we don't have all 4 points of broad activation. So we can use the broad activation to sort of help qualify how wonderful and big something becomes. Okay? It's not going to be the dream work. And we've seen that already with the dashas, right? Mercury doesn't have the capacity to give the dream job. It'll give something in Venus Mercury, but Mercury himself is not going to give the dream job that every day they can't wait to jump out of bed and go to. And that's just their fate and destiny, because their Mercury doesn't have that to give, unfortunately. And when Jupiter Dasha comes, they won't work at all. Because if we go back to the main screen, or not Jupiter Dasha, Ketu Dasha. When they go into Ketu Dasha, they'll totally retire. Ketu's in the 12th with the sun in the Dasamsha. Ketu gives the results of Jupiter, who's debilitated and starved by Mercury. So they won't do any work after Ketu period. That'll be their final retirement. Okay? At which point they will be, how old will they be? Let's see. They will be, gosh, not even that old. They'll be 58 at that time. Okay. 58. They'll be 58. And then in Ketu Dasha, it won't happen necessarily right in Ketu. But between 58 and Ketu period of 6 years, 65, at some point they'll retire in Ketu. And a good chance it won't be that long, because of where Ketu's being debilitated. Ketu's Lord Jupiter's debilitated in in the Samsha. Also, Ketu's in Virgo. Any planet in Virgo can bring up health disorders. And when you get a planet that's keen to retire you, that's tied to Virgo, you oftentimes have to retire a bit early due to just health. Okay? And so, that's what will likely be this. But that's a subject for another class, perhaps, on this chart. So anyway, that's how you use the transits to predict the day. Use what you know to narrow down the window as small as possible, which is usually for most people 2 dashas or 3rd level dasha. Okay? Once you narrow down that window, look for the transit to happen in the Rashi chart. Then look for the transit to happen in the Varga chart. If you see it there, look to see if it's going to happen in the other 3 Vargas. Most of the events people ask about, they want to know the time, which means you need the event to line up in all 3 40th, 45th, and 60th charts. Otherwise, it's not going to be the day. So when somebody says, when am I going to meet the man or the woman? Well, once you predict it in the Rashi and the Saptamsha, then you need to predict it in the 60th, 40th, and 45th. Otherwise, they're not going to meet anyone of note. After they've met that person of note, you can just look at transits involving the Rashi and Saptamsha to see the next steps on their relationship. So you can say, oh, this is the first time you did this, or this day you had a really nice date. The next big step, like engagement, and the next after that, marriage, you'll want to see the events lining up in the 40th, 45th, and 60th. But all the other small events between meeting and engagement, and between engagement and marriage, and even between meeting and having sex, all the small events between all those things, you don't need the 40th and 45th and 60th Vargas to line up. You'll just need the Saptamsha and the Rashi to line up. Same for any field, for career or, whatever, sportsmanship, whatever. It's for the big things that we need those other Vargas to line up. For all the little things in between, the different big pinnacles of any item in our lives, you will, for those small things, you will just need the Rashi and the Varga transit to line up to predict that day. But that's not ever going to be the day that they're looking for. They're going to go, when am I going to get engaged? When am I going to get married? When am I going to meet this person? When am I going to get a job? After they get a job, they don't care when they're going to have a great day at work so much. You can still predict those, say you're going to have a really good day next Friday. But they usually don't come for that. They come to know, when am I going to get the job? Okay? All right. So there's the first example, and I hope that's a helpful example of basically how you would actually do the technique. Okay? Thank you.